So obviously the shaking has started again, and this is how bad it is. So this is not me shaking the phone, this is my actual body contracting. So I think it's either suspected pneumonia or meningitis. So I got bloods at 11 o'clock this morning, so hopefully things will improve. YouTube, welcome back to the second video of the channel. Firstly, just want to touch on and say thank you to everyone who subscribed. Some great traction, some great feedback on the first video. It's been brilliant. I've been dropping some shorts in as well on different sort of topics. I'll be dropping those in a few times a week, which are getting really, really good sort of analytics. But yeah, obviously the first story is about me, my competitive journey up until the present day, winning the IFBB Pro card, and then obviously the second video I want to touch on and talk about endocarditis. Now, for people who don't know what endocarditis is, it's a bacterial infection of the heart. Okay, now it's a sort of, just think of it like a form of sepsis. And what people don't seem to realize is sepsis kills more people a year than cancer and heart disease combined. So it's important for me to talk about this, get awareness out there, how you can contract it, and it'll shock you how easily it might frighten a lot of people. For people who don't know, I contracted endocarditis in March 2022 with a simple trip to the dentist. So yeah, let's get on with my crazy story, how I nearly nearly lost my life, and I'm here to talk about it. And I don't look at it as in like I cheated death. I look at it like I beat death, because it wasn't my time, but I honestly believe the life that you live, you reap where you sow, and bodybuilding absolutely saved my life. The way I live my life absolutely saved my life. And I'll touch on that, okay? So yeah, March 2022. So at this point, I was roughly about 270 pounds. And I remember it vividly. This week I was training in the gym and I was complaining, I was fatigued all the time. I was really tired. I didn't have much appetite. I was lethargic. And I remember training in the gym and I was strong as fuck. And I was like, say I was 270. And I remember, two boys handing me the EZ bar and I was doing 70 kilo skull crushers. And I remember getting up and saying to them, I just don't feel well. I feel fatigued. I feel like I've got test flu. At this point in time, I was doing, as I said in my last video, I was doing 6 mil a week. I was doing 3 mil on a Monday, 3 mil on a Thursday, test, mast, trend. And sometimes you can get that kind of feeling of people call it test flu. And I felt like that. I felt like quite run down, quite fatigued. And then I woke on a Sunday morning and I was going to go for a drive, go get some coffee and ice cream, I think it was. And I remember, waking up that morning, trying to get changed, and I was just shivering uncontrollably. And I thought obviously I was cold, which you do, shivering's, is your body trying to generate heat. So I was shivering uncontrollably, trying to put my socks on, trying to get changed. And I was like, Jesus Christ, something's mad of you. I'm coming down with an illness, I'm coming down with a virus. So anyway, still got changed, got in the car, drove to a local, beauty spot, Mumbles, where I live. And I literally couldn't drive. I'd been in the car like 10 minutes. And I remember saying to a friend, look, you're gonna have to drive for me. You're gonna have to, turn the car around and take me home. I can't go. So went back home, got in bed because me shivering, thinking that I'm cold. Gets in bed, lays down, the shivering goes. So I'm in bed, I feel fine. I get up, walk to the ensuite bathroom, go to the toilet, and I think, it's going to happen again now. I get back in bed and I'm shivering uncontrollably again. So this keeps on happening now, like, 3-4 times a day. So this was on a Sunday. So obviously the Monday, I ring the GP, go to the GP. He does a urine test, like a dip test. I think he sends me for bloods. Sends me the bloods to the local hospital. I have an attack when they're taking the bloods I'm shivering and shaking uncontrollably. And they do nothing about it. They basically just, we're taking your bloods, sent me packing. So I ring back up for the GP for the blood results, I think the next day or the following day, and bloods are fine. So still having these attacks every day. I'm shivering uncontrollably. I think my temperature got up to 39.7, okay, which is absolutely wild. So this was happening throughout that week. And honestly, I think it was a combination of a lot of things that saved my life. But one of them was Dr. Patel. I basically rings the surgery on a Friday. I said, look, it's happening again. I'm shivering and And he's like, look, come to the surgery. We're closing now, but I'll wait for you. I've got a letter, take her to Singleton Hospital. So I drive to the GPs. I'm banging on a fire exit. He opens the door. He says, got a letter here. Go straight to Singleton Hospital. They're waiting for you, and they'll have a look over you. So drives to Singleton Hospital. This is a Friday night. They get me in the waiting room. I think I'm in the waiting room till about 1 o'clock in the morning. So I must have been there, 4 or 5 hours. They get me in this tiny little room, single bed on the right-hand side. And then they come in and they go through the rigmarole. Are you taking anabolic steroids? I'm like, yes, I'm doing TRT. And I was on a TRT dose there when I was pulling back. What are you taking? I'm taking Sustanon 250. What is that? That I write it down for them. What is TRT? Testosterone replacement therapy. I was doing that. So they're writing all this down. They're checking me over. They're doing bloods. They're doing scans. I think I had a chest scan. I had a brain scan. And they thought it was meningitis. So they're like, they're doing all this. And they come in and they said, right, get on the bed. Get in the fetal position. We're going to do a lumbar punch in the spine. For people who don't know, obviously, big needle, big injection into the back, so where they can draw spinal fluid. So I get on the bed, they numb my back. I can feel her going in. I can feel the pressure. And then obviously she pulls it out and says, look, I couldn't get any fluid. I'm going to go back in. I'll try again. Goes in a second time, comes back out, hasn't got the fluid. She goes, right, I'll try a third time now. If I can't get this third attempt, I'm gonna have to call anaesthetist to come and do it. Luckily, she gets the fluid on the third attempt. So off she goes. I'm in the bed. I remember sitting on the end of the bed, and I think I sat there for hours. I think it must have been 4 or 5 hours, and I think my heart rate was like 130 beats, something crazy. I know I was on 3 litres of oxygen, and my O2 stats, my oxygen stats was like 86% on 3 litres of oxygen, and which is crazy. They come back negative. So the spinal fluid for meningitis was negative. So they basically give me paracetamol and sent me home, sent me packing. So from the hospital to where I lived was about 15-minute drive. I get home, sits on the sofa, and then the phone goes, can you come straight back? We found bacteria in your blood. We need you back here straight away. I was like, no problem. So I actually made a video, and I'm like, fucking pissed off. I got to go back to the hospital. I've been there hours, yada, yada, yada. So anyway, he gets back in the car, goes back to the hospital, and this is where I started to go downhill. They get me in the room. I'm in the room all night. I'm sitting on the end of the bed, fatigued. My heart rate's elevated. They still don't know what the hell is going on. And they basically moved me then up to ITU, the intensive care unit upstairs. They tried putting a CPAP mask on me. For people who don't know what that is, it's a big oxygen mask where they strap it to your head. And every time you take a breath in, it blows air into your lungs quite violently. So this lasted 30 seconds. Obviously, I'm struggling to breathe at this point. My O2 stats are low. Every time I was breathing, it was just making me, it was giving me sort of anxiety, and I was breathing out of my sort of rhythm. So then I goes, look, get this off me. Pull the mask off me. get it off. They're like, no, you've got to keep it on you for at least an hour. I was like, I can't take it out. So they take it off me. They put a standard mask on me. So then they get me out to the bed. So couldn't get me out to the bed. I need to sit in a chair. I couldn't lay back. I was uncomfortable. They sat me in a chair and I waited there. And 4 o'clock in the morning, an ambulance came to pick me up and they were going to blue light me over to a separate hospital, Morrison Hospital. So 4 o'clock came. They got me in the ambulance. They took me to Morrison Hospital, and the following morning, they done a mobile echocardiogram. Now, an echocardiogram is an ultrasound of the heart. So they do this echocardiogram, and they can see a mass on my valve. So for what I can remember, I was moved into ITU in Morrison. I was wired up to all these machines. I think I was on fentanyl. I remember there was a big driver there. So every time the driver went green, the light, I could press a button and it'd administer drugs to me. So I think I was just pressing that every time it went green. At this point, unbeknown, I was dying. So then all of a sudden I've got 6 surgeons at the bottom of my bed. And they're like, look, and these were his exact words. He's like, we don't know you're alive. You've been in acute heart failure for the last week. Your valve is obliterated. You've contracted endocarditis, a bacterial infection of the heart. It's latched onto your valve and it's ate your valve away. And I'm sitting there thinking, your heart, anyone who hears anything like that is gonna, it's gonna take, your feet away from you. And I was thinking, this isn't happening to me. This ain't happening to me. Like, this can't be. I'm never ill. I hadn't been a GP in 9 years. So he says, your valve's obliterated. Look, we got a problem. He said, normally we'd give you antibiotics for 2 weeks to kill the bacteria and then we'd go in and operate. He said, but you're not going to be in 2 weeks. He's like, if it'd been one of us, we'd be dead. Like, the fact you're so physically fit, so physically strong is the only reason you're here. And I put that down to bodybuilding. I put that down to my competitive history. The way I know training's a form of stress. Getting down to these crazy body fat levels is a form of stress. And I honestly believe that week I was in heart failure is the only reason I held on, because my body was used to trauma. So he's like, look, Mr. Andrews, have you been anywhere? Have you been on holidays? Have you, I think he was racking off all these different things. I was like, no. And he's like, you've been to the dentist? I was like, yeah, I went to the dentist week before last. He was like, that's it. He knew straight away. He's like, that's it. I was like, really? He's like, yeah. So I obviously, when I went to the dentist a week before I came ill, I went for a simple scale and polish, and I remember it vividly. I remember going in there. I remember she was going under my gum line. I was bleeding profusely from my gums. When you bend over and you kind of spit in the sink. I remember there was lots of blood where she was going under my top gum, and you know how painful it is when they're going under there and he's scraping, getting the plaque in it. And it's not like there was a load of plaque there. I've always had good teeth. I've been with this dentist for 3 years privately. Regular checkups, regular scale and polishes, but somehow bacteria in the blood in my mouth got into my bloodstream, went down, latched onto the valve and ate the valve away. So this is how this happened. And let me be real, guys. The way you can catch endocarditis is multiple ways, okay? The 2 most common ways is oral health, your teeth, and a cut. Like gardening is very common with endocarditis as well. If you've got a cut on your finger, a nick, bacteria gets in there from the soil, it can travel up. Or if you've got a cut, this dirt can get in there, or it's not treated properly, you can catch endocarditis. If you're going to inject and you say your skin is dirty and you don't swab, you can get it that way. So that is how you can contract endocarditis. That simple. But the main sort of 2 ways are, the main one is like your oral health. Your teeth, your oral health are linked to your heart. I know a guy, a friend, same age as me, he had a rotten tooth and it was seeping into his bloodstream unbeknown, and he ended up having a heart attack and a stroke. And he's had a valve replacement, but he's actually got AF now. So he's actually got arterial fibrillation from that. I know another person in the gym, her brother, receptionist, he was in his 50s, rotten tooth again, contracted endocarditis, and he didn't recover very well. I think when I spoke to her, he'd had the surgery, and I think he'd been 6 months prior, of 6 months post-surgery, and he was still trying to recover. Obviously, he doesn't lead a very good lifestyle, isn't fit, isn't in shape, and that's going to be massive sort of factors on how you recover. So anyway, back to me. I'm in ITU. They're telling me this, and he knows this obviously from the dentist, and he's like, look, Neil, you're in a bad way. I'm going to tell you as it is, personally, I think you should get your affairs in order. We're going in life-saving surgery tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. So obviously they walk off. I'm just left to my own devices. And I'm thinking, I just write my will on my phone in a text message. I make a video for my daughter who's in private boarding school, Phoenix. I make a video for her. I don't even know. I don't think I've even watched that video. I deleted it. I don't even remember what I even said. And I write my will, and then I got to get my father and my sister on FaceTime and basically tell them, look, I've been told to get my affairs in order. I don't know if I'm going to survive the surgery. And personally, hand on my heart, I didn't think I was going to survive the surgery. I just thought, this is it. This is my time. And I could hear kind of gurgling in my voice. So obviously, this is where the valve was backloading blood and backfilling my lungs. So next morning, they come and get me. They wheelie me down, and I can be honest with you, when you're presented with something like that, you don't think of things like, people think when you're faced with a life and death situation, you don't think of your family, you don't think of your kids, you don't think of, you can see the sky again. You're so immersed in the moment and in your surroundings. I remember them just taking me down the corridor, and you're just like, you're just taking things in. They wheel me through the doors. They're talking to me. I'm trying to make conversation. They're putting the anaesthetic into my hand. And I'm thinking, right, here we go. I'm going to go unconscious any minute and, any second. And am I going to wake back up? And then bang, I'm gone. So the surgery was 6 hours, okay? They sawed me from here right down, sawed my sternum, cracked my sternum open. They collapsed the lungs, moved the lungs out of the way. They obviously put me on a bypass machine, cut the heart, went into the heart, cut the valve out, and then they microsurgeryed a £14,000 carbon fibre valve in place. So where you guys have got a flesh valve, I've just got a carbon fibre valve. The carbon fibre valve will outlive me. In trials, it lasts 150 years. People run marathons with these valves. So the only sort of downside to the valve is that I'm on warfarin for the rest of my life. So my blood is 3.5 times thinner than the average person. So you guys watching this, your blood is normally 1 INR, so it'll be 1. Mine is 3.5, so my blood is 3.5 times thinner than yours. So that means it takes 3.5 times longer to clot as well. So if I have a cut, I would just bleed and bleed and bleed. It's but that is the only sort of thing that I've had, with the valve replacement. So yeah, operation was 6 hours. They induced me into a coma for 2 days. And the crazy thing is, people who know me, martial arts was my first sport growing up as a kid. I'm a massive Bruce Lee fan. One of my favourite films ever is Karate Kid. It's like in my top 10. And Karate Kid 2, there's a song in that film by Peter Cetera called Glory of Love. It's one of my favourite songs. And this is on my kids' lives. When they brought me round, I can remember them bringing me round. I had the tube down my throat. I can remember trying to pull the tube out. And they were like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I'm like, I'm going to be sick. I'm going to be sick. I pulled the tube out. And then obviously I burst out crying, very emotional, because the first thought, God, I'm alive. And on the radio was Peter Cetera, Glory of Love, was playing on the radio. I can remember hearing it right there and then. And I can remember Sammy, the nurse, my friend, brought me a cup of tea. And I was emotional, I was crying, and I remember the nurse walking over in front of me, turning the TV on, and what comes on the TV? Karate Kid. Unbelievable. I even grabbed the phone and took a photo. So this is in minutes of me, being brought back round after, surgery in 2 days of being induced into a sort of a coma. And yeah, that was the start of my recovery. So then, they take me down to a high dependency ward. A high dependency ward's probably got like 12 beds in there, but they got 2 nurses to every patient. So high dependency ward, I was in there for a couple of days. I was experiencing sort of vertigo. I was hallucinating because the problem for me was being cut open. I couldn't lay back even at a slight angle, so I couldn't get in the bed. So the only comfort that I could get was sitting in a chair like this. So I sat in a chair like this for like practically 15 to 18 hours a day. I wasn't sleeping, so then I was hallucinating. I remember sitting in the chair and, reaching out to get a cup of tea off my father, and all of a sudden he wasn't there. Just really, really weird. Just really sort of testing things, and then when I'd pull the curtain on the bed to go, to pee in like the jug, after I finished, I'd be screaming to pull the curtain round because I'd have to see the entire ward. I'd have closure issues, claustrophobia, which I don't suffer from. It's just crazy. And then obviously I had these wires coming out of my midsection. Okay, I didn't know what these wires did. And lucky I didn't. So they came to me, they said, right, Neil, we gotta obviously, another thing I remember, being a bodybuilder, being somebody who's very strong, not just physically as well, to sit on an end of a bed and be washed, and I didn't even have the strength to even wash my forearm. That was like, it was just so mentally challenging. And that was in the high dependency ward. So then they came to me one day and they said, look, get up on the bed. And I was like, I'll try and get on the bed. We're going to take your wires out. I was like, right, okay. So I get on the bed. The nurse cuts these wires and pulls these wires. I wasn't looking because I'm just laying trying to look at the ceiling because I don't want to see what they were doing. But obviously she cut the wires, which I kind of reacted to. Pulled the wires and I was screaming the ward down, absolutely screaming. She's like, oh my God, you shouldn't be in that much pain. I'll get a surgeon. Surgeon comes. He's like, lay back. I said, I fucking can't lay back. He said, lay back, you got to. And I knew they had to come out. So he cuts the wires and he pulls the wires out. And I only can describe it as like being gutted with a knife. I was screaming and then obviously, it passed. And then unbeknown, I didn't know, when they opened up my chest, they attached and stitched these wires to my heart lining. So when they wired me closed, because when they finished the operation, they basically closed my chest up, and like you see the wire on a wine bottle, they basically put wire around the breastbone, they twist it like that, and they bend it down, and I've got them going all the way up, and I'm tripled wired. So they are still in me right now for life. So they wire you up, and obviously they push all the wires down, and then they obviously stitch the skin. So when they were cutting those wires and they were pulling them wires out, they were unraveling from my heart lining and coming through my midsection. So I'm glad they didn't tell me that before they were going to do it, because I never will let them. But then they moved me onto the Cyril Evans ward on Morrison Hospital. I went onto a ward. I spent one day on a ward, and then they moved me into a private room on my own. And I spent 3 months on Cyril Evans ward. When post-surgery, again, for somebody who was a bodybuilder, who goes off aesthetics, what we see in the mirror. I've analysed myself. We're all self-critical. We all self-sabotage at some level. And I always remember trying to walk. I walked into the toilet and I looked at myself for the first time in 3 weeks. And I was just a shell of myself. I probably didn't look that bad, to be honest with you. But comparing to what I last saw me, because obviously I was 270 pound jacked going into hospital. I'd lost 20 kilos in weight. I had, bandage down here, couldn't see the scar. It was just, I just broke down. I broke down in the toilet, and I just, so emotionally, the trauma of, being sprung on you. I got, ill so quick, got into hospital, went into ITU, having an heart operation, writing my will, it was horrendous, absolutely horrendous. And So I'd lost 20 kilos in weight, and then I had the rehabilitation team getting me up, walking me up and down the ward, and then I was taking my oxygen off. I couldn't walk literally from here to the camera without carrying a bottle of oxygen. But then I was taking my oxygen off. I was walking to the end of my ward. Then I was walking to the entrance of my ward. Then I was walking down the corridor. And every day I was walking a little bit further. And people who followed me on social media, they probably were seeing me walking through the corridors of Morrison Hospital. I weren't just going to sit there and see my recovery out for 3 months. I'm not built like that. So every day I walked a little bit further. I got a little bit better. I stopped my pain medication. They're like, you don't want? And I was like, no, I don't want the pain medication. So yeah, and I was walking out, and I can remember I thought, right, I'm going to walk up a flight of stairs now. So I walked up a flight of stairs. It must have been 15 steps, not steep. And from bottom to top, I think my heart rate was like 140 beats. And I was like, like gasping now. And I'm not being funny, when you can't get oxygen in and you start getting anxiety and an anxiety attack, and you start making it worse. So then I remember like pacing it back to my room, and then obviously putting my oxygen back on. I had this machine where I had to blow in to try and obviously train my lungs again. But going back a little bit further now, post-surgery, they wheelchaired me down to Costa coffee shop in the hospital, and I'll always remember this. And as they wheeled me down there, my anaesthetist walked in, and I was sitting there with my father, and he said to me, oh, you're looking good, the operation went well, you're very lucky. He said, when we went in, when we put the tube in you, when you was in theatre, you aspirated fluid all over theatre. He's like, when that happens, it's end of life. But you survived. He's like, you were strong enough. He's like, but 99% of the time when that happens to a patient, they're gone. He's like, you had around about 1.5 to 2 litres of fluid in your lungs. He's like, if you hadn't gone in right there and then, you would have been dead the next morning. So that's how close we came for me to losing my life. And I think when you go through something like this, it makes you really reflect, makes you really appreciate things, and not get sort of hung up over the mundane things in life. So yeah, spent 3 months in the Civil Evans ward. The staff were amazing. I think we take the NHS here in the UK for granted. Unbelievable. I think I cost the NHS $250,000. When you take in, I had my own room, the bed, I was in hospital for 3 months, the medication, I was getting injected every day, multiple times a day, bloods were checked multiple times a day, because and then I had a PICC line. So I had a PICC line in my bicep here, tiny little, a PICC line is basically like a tiny thin tube. So they inject it into my vein in my bicep, and they feed it right through the main artery, right down to the heart. So then they were putting antibiotics in my bicep here, into that PICC line, every 4 hours, 24 hours a day for 3 months. You're talking a syringe driver like that. So they'd come in 6 o'clock in the morning, put antibiotics in there, come back 10 o'clock in the morning, antibiotics, 2 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 10 p.m, 2 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, round the clock. For 3 months, non-stop, they were putting antibiotics in that PICC line directly into the heart to try and, saturate the body and get rid of the bacteria that was present. And we knew it was the dentist, because Mr. Zaidi, obviously, when I told him, he was like, yeah, that's it. But the microbiology team in Marston had to test the bacteria to know what antibiotic to give me, and it was oral bacteria. And he said to me when he went in, the valve is 3 leaflets. 1 leaflet was pinned open. Another leaflet had vegetation growing on it, the size of his thumbnail. And obviously, because it's a one-way valve where blood is pumping up, obviously because the leaflet was flicked open, it was pinned open, and the heart was under so much strain, it was trying to backfill my lungs. So when I could hear the gurgling, that was obviously the fluid building up in my lungs. So absolutely crazy story. Spent 3 months in hospital, got discharged. And then obviously for me, I never ever thought I was going to bodybuild again. It wasn't even on my mind. For me, it was getting home. I was so detached from, social media, my car, my house, my dogs. Just, I was in a room for 3 months with a little window with no view, it was just, for me, it was just getting home, trying to get back to normality and trying to recover. And I just thought I need to get in the gym. I need to start getting healthy, start putting some weight back on and just trying to rebuild, not bodybuild, but just try and go down a more fitter sort of and just trying to recover basically. I weren't allowed to do anything with my upper body for 3 months because obviously they'd sewn my sternum open to just let my sternum, the bone, heal. So I was just in the gym training legs every fucking day, every other day. Whatever I could do, I was there. I was doing cardio every morning, walking the streets, rain, it was hammering down. I was walking with an umbrella. I was doing cardio. I was training legs. And then after 3 months, I started to do upper body. And I remember going in the gym, trying to do a side lateral with a 5 kilo dumbbell. And I couldn't even do it. Mentally, of a head fuck that is for somebody who's very strong to not be able to do that. Not lifting weights that you can lift and you're struggling with. So that was the process. And for me then, it was just, take every day, step by step, week by week. And I started getting bigger, started getting stronger, weight started going back on. I stopped all my medication. They put me on bisoprolol, Ramipril, post-surgery. They put me on diuretics. So when I went for my checkup post-surgery, they're like, right, what medication are you taking? I was like, I've stopped the Ramipril, I've stopped the bisoprolol, and I've stopped the flutamide. Why? I was like, well, the flutamide was only there post-surgery, I understand that, to offload the water retention post-surgery to let the valve set in and let the heart sort of, take the pressure off the heart post-surgery. But with 3 months post-surgery, I don't need to be on diuretics now. Look at my ankles. There's no pooling of fluids in my lower limbs. I've got no edemas. And she couldn't give me an answer. She knew I was right. And I was like, bisoprolol, Ramipril, the blood pressure medication. I haven't got high blood pressure. So when I came out of hospital, I invested in an Omron blood pressure monitor. So they're the best. If you're going to hospitals and they do your blood pressure, they're using an Omron machine. So I was tracking my blood pressure as soon as I got out of hospital. My blood pressure was immaculate. So I was like, there's my blood pressure for the last 3 months. It's immaculate. I'm not going to take blood pressure medication when I haven't got high blood pressure. She couldn't say anything. So yeah, that was that. And then obviously in the gym, started training, everything started coming back, the weight, the strength, and that was that. Now obviously with the warfarin, I'm on warfarin for life. So I've got an INR machine. So I check my blood when I need to, but probably every other day. So like I said, my blood, my INR, which is your international normal ratio, normalized ratio, is basically the thickness of your blood. So I will prick my finger, put it on a strip, put the strip in a machine, and it'll tell me how thick my blood is. For me, with a valve, the thinner the blood, the better, because the valve works off blood pressure. So the thinner the valve, the better it is. So the only downside of being on warfarin, I can't have anything with vitamin K. I can't eat pineapple. I can't eat mango. I can't eat blueberries. I can't have cranberries, which is the worst. Spinach, kale, broccoli. I could eat spinach, kale and broccoli, but I'd have to eat it every single day so it levels out with my INR. So if I eat anything with vitamin K, it will lower my INR. So like I said, my blood thinness is 3.5. The lower that number goes, the thicker the blood, the worse it is for the valve. So if my blood goes below 1.8, I'm at risk of a clot on the valve, which we don't want. So then I have to have a Clexine injection in my midsection to keep my blood from clotting while I build my blood thinness back up to 3.5. So this is how I monitor all myself. I've got my own machine, things like that. So like I said, because my blood is 3.5, it's 3.5 times thinner than yours. That means it takes 3.5 times longer to clot. Even getting a spot, it just fucking bleeds. Cut, it'll bleed. It'll take longer to scab and things like that. So it's not all doom and gloom. And to be honest with you, the things that I don't eat now, I don't miss. All right, I did eat a bit of pineapple, but I never had mango. I never had blueberries. I never had cranberries. I never had spinach, kale, broccoli. So, it hasn't affected me. But obviously not having those kind of vegetables, then you're going to be careful with your folate. That means your folate's going to be low. So this is why I take quaternolic. You know, I don't take folic acid because if you've got the MTHR gene, which most people have, you can't absorb folic acid. This is why they invented quadrafolic. Is a methylated form of folic acid. So I take quadrafolic, 800 mcgs every day, and it keeps my folate in range. So that is basically it in a nutshell, guys. So yeah, you know, be careful with what you're doing, obviously. And then, yeah, obviously in the gym, size was back up, you know, strength was back up. And then I thought, you know what? Yeah, let's start dieting. Let's diet for the show and see what we look like. And this was 2024. And I had no clue what I was going to look like. On TRT, the bare bones, you know, 3 years out of competing, you know, coming out of, you know, heart surgery, what would I look like? And I said to myself, if I diet down and I don't look like my former self and I can't be competitive on stage, I'm going to pull the plug, because I'm not going to hand anyone a fucking win, and I'm sure as hell not going to stand on stage a former version of myself. What did I go and do in 2024? Steps into a new federation, 2 bros, wins 2 classes, wins an overall, beats everyone in the bodybuilding classes, some awesome guys. My first show back. Then I goes to the central qualifier, PCA, wins my class, misses out on the overall, controversial. Then I goes to the Britain, win the Britain, and then was I class 1? Yeah, I was. No, yeah, 2024, sorry. I goes to the Britain and I came second in Britain. So that was pretty phenomenal as well. And then obviously 2025, no, sorry, I get my mix up. 2024, goes to the Britain, wins the Britain, wins my PCA Pro card up there, goes into the Pro show, and then wins the Pro show. So yeah, 2024, absolutely bonkers. So couldn't have made a better comeback than I possibly imagined. So yeah, so guys, you know, dentist, oral health, it's super important, okay? Your oral health is linked to your heart health, and this is why then, obviously, as soon as I got discharged from hospital, spoke to my heart surgeon, and I went to Turkey and had my teeth done. I wanted to be as orally as healthy as possible. And I went to Seville in Turkey. She trained in Harley Street in London. So it's exactly what they would do in the UK, but half the price. I think I ended up paying like $5,500 for my teeth. And any work that need to be done, you know, or extractions, things like that, make the mouth orally healthy before they fit the crowns. So best money I ever spent. And again, just be mindful that your oral health is linked to your heart health, okay? It's been an absolute bonkers journey. I remember going to a show and this couple just pulled me to one side and said, oh, we've seen your video. We know you caught endocarditis. You know, we're so glad you survived. We know a girl who had the shivering and, you know, she didn't survive. She died. So, you know, and lots of guys have reached out to me on social media who've had valve replacements, who have genetic, you know, problems with their valves, and they've had to, you know, they wanted to ask my advice, what the recovery was like, what the surgery was like. Yeah, so, you know, be careful, guys. And oral health, cuts, dirt, you know, swabbing before you inject and things like that is so important. But it's a crazy story. I'm a year, but who would have known, you know? And I think, you know, life will throw curveballs to you. Did I think I was going to go to the dentist and nearly lose my fucking life? No, I didn't. And make sure that you're in a position where you can, you know, when life throws a curveball at you, you can, you know, overcome and tackle those. I honestly believe if I was just a run-of-the-mill guy, I would have been dead. You know, the fact that I was so fit, so strong, the life I live, I don't drink, I've never smoked, you know, I've always had good blood work, you know, I've competed, I train, you know, training is a form of stress, diet into crazy body fat levels is a form of stress. My body was able to hold on for that week, you know, before they got me into hospital and into theatre to operate. So I don't count myself lucky. You reap what you sow. And I think if you pay for it now, you're either going to pay for it now by doing those things, getting in shape, getting your diet in check, you know, looking after yourself, or you're going to pay for it later. And you're going to pay for it later by having those consequences, you know, and not overcoming the things that life is going to throw you. Because they say everyone, you know, has one major surgery in their lifetime. So when that comes around, guys, make sure you're, you know, in the best physical shape possible. So I hope you kind of got something from this video. Please share this video. Please like, please subscribe to the channel. We're going to get some real good content out there now. But I just wanted to obviously touch on about my experience with endocarditis, how I contracted it, how I nearly lost my life. My daughter never got to watch that video. And to be honest though, I probably suffer with a bit of PTSD to this day, you know, because they offered me counselling post-surgery and I refused it because for me, getting discharged out of hospital after 3 months, I just wanted to go home and I just wanted to look forward and try and start rebuilding and getting back to normality. I didn't want to kind of like talk and relive that. Even now is quite difficult. And my heart anniversary is coming up now in March. It's a day where I always kind of reflect and they call it your heart anniversary. So, you know, I have it tattooed on my arm right here, the date. So yeah, very blessed, very privileged to still be here. And look, who would have thought, you know, when I was sitting in that bed recovering in 2022 that, you know, 3 years later, I'd be an IFBB pro bodybuilder. So anything is fucking possible. You can come back from anything in life, guys. This vessel that carries you through life is unbelievably resilient. It will fucking take a lot of stress that you throw at it. But please look after it, because if you look after it, it will look after you. And I honestly believe that what I do daily and the life I lead is what saved my fucking life. You know, longevity, you know. And, you know, when I sat in that bed, all the trophies, the clothes, the cars, everything I love, you know, it doesn't mean anything. It meant nothing. Nothing means anything if you haven't got your health. And your health is not guaranteed, guys, okay? So, thank you. If you got this far, I really do appreciate it. Please like and subscribe to the channel. And please give this a share. You know, share on your stories on social media and get this out there. And yeah, it's be aware of the signs when you know, high temperature, fatigue, shivering. You know, that was the telltale signs for me. And you know what? I got looked at by nurses, I got looked at by GPs, and none of them picked it up. There was endocarditis, which is absolutely crazy. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And I will see you in the next video, guys.